Today, there are 2 million descendants of French-Canadian immigrants living in New England. These are our stories. Welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Venez tous jeunes filles et garçons, je vais vous raconter l'histoire de notre immigration ici au USA, de grands aventuriers, de pays étrangers.
Bonjour everyone, this is Melody and we're back with French Canadian news. I hope everyone had a great Saint Jean-Baptiste Day and 4th of July. Let's get back into it. We'll start with an article on Franco-American news and culture by Juliana Leroux titled, French Canadian Legacy Podcast Recognized in New Hampshire. In case you somehow haven't heard, our very own producer Mike Campbell of the French Canadian Legacy Podcast is 2024's Franco-American of the Year by the Franco-American Centre in Manchester. This article goes over the history of the coveted title and talks about the French Canadian Legacy Podcast as a whole. Go check it out. Next up, we have a blog post from Query the Past by Patrick Lacroix titled Franco-American Archives, SUNY Plattsburgh. From the blog post, we continue to see online posts and comments about the Patriot invasion and occupation of Quebec in 1775 to 1776. The subject has become something of a niche parlor game for Quebec history buffs. Some people are quick to opine on the merits of British rule and whether French Canadians in the St. Lawrence River Valley might have fared better as the 14th state. For more history, check out the post. For Franco-American book news, check out French Boy, a 1950s Franco-American childhood by Denis Ledoux. In this memoir, Denis shares stories from his childhood and what made it distinctly Franco-American. He also covers topics like the conflict between bilingualism, persistent nostalgia for a past, looking for mentors beyond one's reach, and the discomfort and shame of otherness. While you're at it, check out the latest post on Denis's Substack, the Life Writer's Digest, titled Telling the Truth in Your Memoir, A Better Approach. And now for some quick event news. If you're wanting to attend Maine Poutine Fest this fall, sign up for their newsletter to get the latest updates on ticket sales. Tickets will go on sale July 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern. So sign up for these crucial updates to increase your chances of snagging a ticket to the first Poutine Fest of its kind in Portland, Maine. That's all I've got for you this time. Everything I've covered today will be linked in the French Canadian Legacy Podcast episode description. Merci for listening.
Thank you, Melody. This week, we have the absolute privilege to be speaking with Tony DesRois. Now, those of you who have purchased the book French All Around Us have already had the opportunity to read Tony's story. It is a truly inspiring story of a family from New England, and he grew up down in Florida, and how he has made the effort to connect with his Franco-American heritage, despite being far away from kind of the original location of the Franco-American side of his family. And it's super, super interesting just to hear how he has made his Franco-American culture and identity a major part of his life, like a major emphasis of his life. Like I said, it's truly inspirational. And so it was great to be able to talk to him. And what gets you excited anytime you talk to Tony is that he's always looking to find out what more can be done. He's always looking to put in any kind of effort and time to do whatever he can to promote what we're trying to do here on the podcast, the French Canadian, Franco-American identity, culture, heritage, and he's all in on that. And you'll hear that during the podcast, how he's got ideas going forward of kind of new things that he is looking to start. And you can just hear his passion. It comes through without question and absolutely everything he does. So it was a really fun conversation. I think you'll truly enjoy it. So next week's podcast, again, we're talking with Tony DesRois. But I did want to think, because one thing that I think is cool about your story is obviously you write about French soccer, which is very, very awesome. Maybe you just tell the story of how you got that gig to begin with, which I think is way, way fun. And how do you watch these games from where you are? Because from my perspective, I don't know soccer very well.
Yeah.
I'm a big rugby guy, and so
Okay.
I get a channel that gets me the French rugby games. They're almost always broadcast just in English. So I'm curious where you get yours from.
So when I first started, it was really difficult. I remember being little, and I think I tell this story, but I remember being little, and my grandmother had just a few channels. She just had the two antennas on top
Sure.
of the TV. And so we would get, all the big things, right? We'd get, the World Series, we'd get the Super Bowl, and the World Cup would come on. And I remember like being really interested in that. And in where we lived in Salerno, there was a large migrant population, Mexican, Haitian, and they played soccer.
Yep.
So so when my kids told me they wanted to play soccer, I was totally like behind that. I'm like, all right, like this is awesome. And so I started watching a lot more soccer with them. And so it became, I'm like one of those dads that like totally gets behind, whatever my kids are doing.
Sure.
And so I already was writing. I took journalism in high school, and I already was writing quite a bit, but I found myself just wanting to write about soccer. I was writing a lot on Twitter, just about, my opinion of certain things. And then like, because of the French like connection, like I was like, okay, well, I wanted to check out the French league, which is also interesting because the French league is a really high quality league, but just like everything else, it's like it's the most discredited league. It's called they call it the Farmers League. And
Interesting.
it's a top 5 league, and it's like the quality that and look, the French national team is one of the best teams in the world. Like they're always in all the, like they make it to the finals all the time with the World Cup, Euros.
Sure.
It's like it's crazy to me how discredited the French league is. And I have my own like ideas of why, but also like simply because like there is like this, Anglo-French, like, like it's more or less I think a competitive like thing.
Like a rivalry there, yeah.
Right. And so, but it just kind of stinks that there's so much made about this Farmers League thing. It's like it's ridiculous. But again, it just made me like the league even more. So so it was really hard to find ways to watch the French league. I had to watch clips on YouTube and L'Equipe, which is a French media outlet. I would luckily I was born in the generation we have the internet.
Right.
So I would follow L'Equipe and all these different outlets until I found Get French Football News. They were accepting submissions for something, and I just reached out to them with a like, hey, listen, I'd really like to try to write for you guys. And so they gave me a sample piece to write, a topic to write about. I sent it to them, and they're like, hey, listen, like there's some things that you could work on, but overall this is pretty good. So they worked with me on more or less like a intern type basis.
Gotcha.
To get me started, until I went to like a freelance. And so from to a freelance contract, excuse me. And then now we have like BN Sports, because PSG bought Qatar bought PSG, one of the biggest clubs in France. And they have some ownership in BN Sports. And so now BN Sports shows the French league. So you can get, BN Sports on quite a few streaming platforms.
Gotcha.
And so you're able to watch the French league. I really think like, I mean, Canada does have its own league, the Canadian Premier League, which it's not a bad league at all. I support it, but there's no teams in Quebec in the Canadian Premier League.
Wow.
Not one.
Okay.
And Quebec has a lot of soccer, and there's a lot of good soccer players. So I always think like they should do like Ligue 1, the French league should do more in Quebec to kind of gain that French speaking viewership. Right now it's not being accommodated by Canada. Obviously it's a huge market. And so I think there's a lot of connections there where, even North America could get behind, the French league.
That's awesome, because I did see a lot of way more coverage when I was living in the 6 months I was in Quebec, way more soccer coverage than I ever see here in New England, because especially with the MLS team, you got a lot of this coverage on the news that the Revolution would not get.
Yeah.
Kind of in this area, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's now Montreal FC, but the Montreal Impact. It's definitely gets a big crowd. There's a huge interest for soccer in Quebec, so it's pretty cool.
I like the Impact better, just for the record. I thought that logo was awesome. They used to have actually.
I love that logo. I did too.
But do you get the games in English or in French when they show up on BN Sports?
So they do both. The main game is always in English, but they give you like all 7 channels, which allows you to watch like pretty much every game that goes on. and some of the other games are in French, which I always like. I always wish I actually have wrote them a couple of times. Again, I'm kind of crazy about stuff. I wrote them a couple of times like, hey, you should give the option to like, listen to it in French. And like, obviously if people are familiar with like listening to it in Spanish like that, go.
Oh, sure. Yep.
But like if you listen to the French commentators, it's super exciting to watch in French. Like,
That's awesome.
they're super passionate. It like you can even YouTube like French commentators and like listen to some of like the
That's
like
awesome.
game winners. It's crazy.
That's way fun. Yeah, because the site I use to watch rugby games, they're almost always in English. The only time you don't get it in English is when there's literally no English broadcast picking it up.
Exactly.
That's the only one it's the only time it's ever
Same thing.
available in French. Yeah. Okay.
Same thing.
I got you. All right. Well, this has been fun, Tony. This is very, very cool. Appreciate it, sir.
No worries, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Now our fathers look at us and sigh with despair, to think that everything they love we simply do not share. But the spirit never dies, our culture will survive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive.
Special thanks to Josie Vachon for providing the music. You can find more about her at josievachon.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Mike Campbell. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at fclpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FCL Podcast for more information about the topics discussed. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this episode.